Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying time is here. That's right, we're talking about the 1973 classic, The Exorcist. Believe it or not, on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from the lovely burg we like to call Georgetown. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. We're going to unpack all the goriest and grossest, if you were to believe anyone in 1973, of the details of The Exorcist in the hopes that a young priest's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes that we can make at his expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust that if I wander into the room during a party and tell her on her way up to outer space, she's going to die up there, she won't hold it against me when I pee on the carpet. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
Well, I thank you for not saying that I would leave belligerent drunk in charge of your ailing child while you had to run out and get groceries.
Someone just accusing any Swiss citizen of being a Nazi. Yeah, he's a joy and a delight, that one.
Yeah. Burke Dennings.
Burke Dennings. And then again, let's put a pin in this just for a millisecond, only to say that if you haven't watched The Exorcist, please, for the love of God, go watch The Exorcist.
What are you even doing with your life?
Well,
that's what that. No, I'm not going to be charitable here. I do think that I generally try not to be gatekeepy about such things, but I do think that after a certain point, there are certain movies that all horror fans should watch at some point. You don't have to like them.
Yeah.
But you should watch them. And among those movies are Halloween.
Yes. Okay.
The Thing.
Sure. The 82 version.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Psycho.
Right.
And The Exorcist.
The remake.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
Everyone is dressed like they're in the band Blur.
Right. Exactly. where they thought, where Gus Van Sant thought that the masturbation needed to be more than a little implied.
Yeah, you need to hear some skin on skin contact, some heavier breathing, maybe some thunderclouds. I will say it was worth it for him to just blow Universal's money to do it. Like, it's an interesting experiment. It's just not a film. It is an interesting experiment, but please go on.
And I was going to say, and The Exorcist.
Yeah. The Exorcist. Here's what I wonder about The Exorcist, because occasionally you do come across people who do love horror who are like, it doesn't work for me. And they kind of come into a couple different camps. And one is, I didn't grow up religious, so I didn't have an inherent fear of the devil necessarily to add to it. And that is something that was a hugely compelling factor at the year of its release. And I think that as time goes by and society has trended away from organized religion en masse, that's going to be less of a deal. And I think it feeds a little bit into the second camp, which is most people are going to watch this film at home. And while last night I put in the Blu-ray copy that I happen to have in, and I fired it up, and this was like at 10:30 at night. I put Oliver to bed. I watched something with Becky and said, I think I need to write some notes. I think I need to have it fresh in my head, and fired it up. And usually I have all of the lights off, and I made it 5 minutes in before I had to turn on the light. Again, I was once a child who was scared of the Pink Panther theme. So I am a notorious scaredy cat, but I can't watch it with the lights off. No. This movie changes me on a biochemical level.
100%. I try not to gatekeep. I try not to tell anybody that their opinions on things are incorrect.
Sure, yeah.
But if you're going to look into my face, into my eyes, and tell me you don't think this movie is scary, I call bullshit.
I think you are not paying attention to it,
Right.
or you're watching it under less than charitable circumstances. And I do think this is one of those things where the soundtrack of it really has a lot to do with the unease you feel as it goes on, just beyond the, the theme music that sparks up. There is a palpable timbre and hum to it that is just meant to slowly get its way under your skin. And I find it just unnerving. The film is unnerving.
Like, there's just so much not right about it. Like, before, like, even things really start, going south, just everything is just super unsettling.
Yeah. Like the rat in the attic, right? It doesn't sound like a rat in an attic. It sounds like something is trying to crawl its way out of the floorboards a la Hellraiser, but with like claws.
Yeah, it sounds like something is like banging and scratching against the floor.
Yeah. And it's like no rat on earth has ever made that noise. And, it does something to me. And I think that in a huge situation where you were watching it in a theater, and for those who might not be familiar exactly with how big of a deal The Exorcist was, I would implore them to look up on YouTube cultural impact of The Exorcist. This was a documentary made at the time of the film's release, and it centers more than half of it on a local theater called the National Theater in Westwood, California. This is by UCLA. It's on the west side of town. And people would wait in line between 2 and 7 hours to get a ticket to this. There's no advanced sales. So already people are kind of exhausting themselves before they're even getting into the theater. The anticipation, the reputation of the film, hearing people on their way out talk about what it was and what it was like, and then seeing people captured on film just fucking collapsing.
People were like vomiting and running out of the theater and claiming that they had like nervous breakdowns after watching it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I've seen this movie a lot. It's probably one of my favorite horror movies, and it seems weird to call it favorite because it is just so unpleasant at times, and it's very bleak, and there's pretty much not an ounce of humor to it. It's just relentlessly dark, but I just think it's great. And but even watching it now, I'm thinking like, how in the fuck did they get away with this?
It's pretty, I mean, how they got away with it has everything to do with the director coming straight off of just grabbing the Oscars and getting everything he possibly could with the French Connection.
Just imagine today, in our current climate. And it's funny. I was recording the other project I work on, White Ladies in Crisis, the other night. We were doing an episode.
We don't talk about our other projects. Yes, go ahead.
We were talking about Wild Things. That was what our episode was about. The 1998 extremely sleazy
you guys
thriller.
are going to talk about successful erotic thrillers,
yes.
And we're going to relegate ourselves to very unsuccessful
exactly there is the difference. But we got on this subject of you couldn't, we say a lot, oh well, you can't make that movie today. You say it about stuff like Blazing Saddles, which is definitely not true. You could very much make a movie like Blazing Saddles today because it's parodying racists.
Yeah.
But you're not going to have a movie like Wild Things where the main character has a three-way with two high school students. It doesn't matter that neither of the actresses playing the students look like they've seen the inside of a high school recently. Mm-hmm. It's just established that they are, in fact, in high school. Yeah, you're not doing that anymore. But imagine, that was 1998.
Yeah.
This was 1973.
Yeah.
And you've got a movie in which a little girl is forced to assault herself with a crucifix. and then rubs her mother's face in it. And it's just like, I don't even.
Well, when you say it like that, it's almost like there's something wrong with this movie.
Like, I don't even know how. I mean, I'm sure that there's all kinds of, writings about, Friedkin taking this to the studio and them showing it and like, someone having a heart attack and say, yeah, you can't put that up there. And then they did. And it's not, for the benefit of you folks who've only seen it on television, if you watch the uncut version, it does not look away.
No, it does not. It's certainly much more graphic in its unedited form. It's only grown more so. I'm not sure where one has access to the original theatrical version. I don't have that. I don't know that I ever did. There are some things that I find are a little less than successful versus the original theatrical version. Like the spider walk is cool and everything. I think the spider walk is really dependent on whether or not that shot of her opening her mouth and blood dripping out at the end of the shot. That to me is like, oh, that is super weird, super gross.
Right.
It's unnerving. I think the spider walk looks like someone being held up by wires. It's out of bed knobs and broomsticks.
It's a little, because it's also weirdly sped up, and I don't know why it does that. But the interesting thing is,
mask to try to make it look unnatural, but it just ends up adding to the fake sort of artificial way that it goes about it, because they couldn't really erase where the wires hook into the performer's hips. And it's just like, why is her night dress tenting at her hips? It just, all of it points to the trickery, which is why it probably never should have been in there in the first place.
Well, the interesting thing is that is actually in the book.
Yeah. Well, the vast majority of this is really transposed directly from the book.
Yeah. Most of it's pretty dead on, follows the book. I mean, you get a little more with, Burke, which is regrettable, but, he is sort of even though despite what happens to him, sort of really sets things in motion. That's who, Chris McNeil understanding just how bad things really are. He's kind of an essential character overall, so you don't really need to spend as much time with him in the movie as you do in the book.
Right. It's the scene that kind of popped out at me this time is when Reagan is in bed and she's talking to her mom and she's like, it's okay if you want to marry Burke. She's like, oh no, honey, I think you misinterpret our relationship. This is a person that I'm okay hanging out with, but I do not need to marry them. But thank you anyways.
It's like Reagan, you are much too charitable.
I work for this person and I might not ever want to work for them again. I just want this work thing to happen smoothly enough that I'm hired for something else. What do you think the plot of Crash Course is?
Well, obviously, like, she seems to be some sort of activist teacher. I can tell you one thing. It's not any kind of movie William Friedkin would actually make.
William Friedkin really wants to take an audience by the lapels and shake them violently and smack them around a little bit. And it's also like how he likes to treat his actors and anyone who is displaying his film. I believe that Friedkin is an absolute cinematic genius and also kind of a terrible person because of it. Not terrible like he needs to be banned from anything. He's just an infant terrible.
This was just, a thing, a lot of directors used to do. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but you got the directors who will, fire a gun to get the actors to, jump in the right way. And I think it's sort of a weird kind of director's version of method acting.
Right.
Where they don't trust the actors to get the response that to give them the response that they want. I mean, honestly, I do get a kick out of, because the actor himself did not seem to be bitter about it in the long run, about how he got the reaction out of the actor who played Father Dyer, who was not a professional actor. He was a priest.
Yeah.
And so he was supposed to be upset and shaken. And I guess because he was not a professional actor, well, I mean, I don't know why I'm setting this up. You know the story. He hits him.
Yeah,
Before
him straight across the face.
Right. So he gets honestly, if I was an actor, I might be like, just haul off and hit me. Because I don't know if I could give you, I can kind of make myself cry if I need to, but I don't know if I could do it on command. So, just go ahead, slap me. I can take it.
I think, it's one thing to have permission to do so, or to say, hey, I'm going to try something. And the only goal of this is to get you to the place that you tell me you can't quite get to. And I think I can help you get there. Is that okay? That I think it's fine. I think yanking back on a wire so that Ellen Burstyn slips a disc and cracks her head along the very well-built set, that's shitty.
Yeah, that's inexcusable.
That's the sort of behavior that I think has been bred by the auteur theory, and I'm going to do everything I have to do to get you their attitude of 70s, directors in particular. And it's a bit of a myth. Like, it tells me that you are not inventive enough to get people to get to where you need them to be, or trust them, or work with them. You just want results.
Or that you don't really know what the word directing means.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want someone to have, express a certain emotion, you sit down, you tell them what you want them to do. You don't just throw a box of spiders at them or something to get them, screaming and flailing.
And it's very hard to find box of spiders anymore. Like they used to have it in big box stores. And of course, your local hardware store would have box of spiders. But nowadays, it's not like something you can get on Amazon. You have to talk to a local spider collector who will individually craft a box of spiders for you. It's, that's why you pay the premium, because it's a lost art. But even still.
Well, you to take it back to the spider walk and how you said that unfortunately you can kind of see the magic behind the scenes as to how it works, and it is one weak point in the movie special effects, which for the most part they still look pretty good. Oh my
God, they look fucking amazing.
I mean, that makeup is still on Linda Blair is still phenomenal. I mean, she looks just diseased.
How many times have we watched someone's head turn around in the years and decades past The Exorcist, and no one has been able to do it better than here with a mannequin where just the eyes move is somehow so much more realistic and believable than anything any computer has ever dreamt up, or anything any other effects guy has been able to manage. It's just like, it fucking works, and I can't tell you why. I don't know why it looks as good as it does, other than the fact that there's a bit of magic going on here. It's just one of those things where you have the right people behind and in front of the camera, and they're making the right decisions, and they're just in the right pocket, and almost everything in the movie just fucking works. And Dick Smith, God rest his soul, it just absolutely is amazing in what he's able to accomplish in this film. And it wasn't without blood, sweat, and tears from the people who had to endure wearing it.
Right. And it's the blueprint for pretty much all satanic possession movies or demonic possession movies from that point forward.
Right.
The basically the person possessed becoming sort of, withered and sickly and looking like they've been, smacked around by she looks like she's rotting.
Yes, absolutely. And the body bends in unnatural ways. All that stuff is using language that happens here. And I do think it's kind of difficult. Like when we were talking The Conjuring 3, it's difficult. Like so much of that stuff was practical from people who could bend their bodies in that specific way. And this is taking nothing away from them. But we've seen it so many times that I find it amazing to watch the person in rehearsals, bend their neck back and through their armpit. Like, it's incredible that a human being is flexible enough to do that. In the movie, it's kind of like, oh, okay. Just, it doesn't work as well as seeing someone in a gym somewhere going on a mat going, this is what I'm going to do. Let's try it out.
All that, is fine, the visual effects, but what really makes this movie work, and what really keeps you up at night after watching it, is the sound design.
Yes, 100%.
And it's so simple, and so it's just simple the way they did. They just threw together a bunch of animal noises and breathing and they're talking backwards, and of course you've got the stories of Mercedes McCambridge just smoking and drinking a glass of raw eggs, so her voice is all phlegmy and scratchy, and when she breathes in, she's all wheezing, and it's awful. It's so awful, but so good at the same time.
Yeah. It should be noted the sound designer was Steve Boddicker, who's kind of a legend in the industry, not only in film, but in other areas of sound. And Mike Minkler was the sound mixer on this. It's just over the years, because I think people who may have seen this the first time on VHS, like I did, you weren't getting the full breadth of what this movie can actually do. And now, having a smaller version of excellent sound design is relatively easy to accomplish with modern technology. And you really begin to hear and feel how this movie must have felt to audiences in 1973. Looking back to that very quickly in that Cultural Impact documentary, there seemed to be two moments where people freaked the fuck out. One was Mercedes McCambridge and her voice seemed to freak people out. And the second is the scene of the Spinal Tap, which is what freaks me the fuck out.
Oh, yeah. And when you watch the director's cut, or whatever what they marketed as the version you've never seen, which was released in the theater some years ago, all that medical shit there's a lot more of that.
I feel like it touches on one of the elements that you don't hear as much with The Exorcist, because most people sort of focus on the actual exorcism and possession element of it. But I think one of the more unnerving elements of it for me, now that I am a father, is family trauma. You have two people at the center of this motion picture who, Karis and Chris, who have family situations that are out of their control. Karis's mother, she's grown too old. He lives too far away. He doesn't make enough money to have someone look after her full time. And she dies while he's off doing his job. And that involves having faith in a God who's allowing this to happen. Cut that with Chris, whose daughter is going through ailments everyone tells her not to worry about. There's a simple, rational explanation for this. All we have to do is kind of torture her for another week and try a new medication, a new test, a new way that you can see she's reacting badly to, and you can feel her crumble. All the confidence that she exudes as a woman who is a single mom, who's working, who's a movie star. She's got a lot of things going for her, but the idea that she cannot help her own child in this situation.
And she's alone in the situation because Reagan's father is out of the picture. He doesn't even bother calling her on her birthday.
On her fucking birthday. Just, wow. The guy who, he is not being treated very kindly, nor should he in this motion picture. That dude's a real asshole. It's like, oh, I'm off in Rome. I'm away from the situation. I don't have to deal with you and your issues, lady. And it's kind of like, you have a daughter together, asshole. Maybe you should call her on her fucking birthday. Maybe you should get involved. I think he's like Burke Dennings 1.0. It might. Doesn't he come off like, oh, this is like in E.T., someone who goes off to Mexico with his mistress and she's just left at the kitchen sink going, Mexico? He doesn't even like Mexico. To which, if I remember correctly, the first time we watched it with Oliver, he said, oh, she needs help. She needs help. Why won't anyone help her?
You could say the same about Chris McNeil. Why won't anyone help her?
Why doesn't anyone help her? And she has a lot of help, but everyone is frozen by a situation that is just outside of the scope of anyone's imagination.
And let's face it. I mean, really, these doctors are just too busy chain smoking to help her. I can't get. One of my favorite things about watching movies from the 70s is just how much everybody is smoking.
And that it's this like, do you have a cigarette? I happen to have smoked all of my cigarettes at 1 p.m. today. So
it's like, do you mind if I smoke? Sure, brain surgeon, go right ahead. You know? Have you ever seen the movie All That Jazz? It's one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes is when he's getting his physical to get so he can get insurance on his show, and the doctor is like overweight. He's like just puffing away and wheezing and coughing. And he's like trying to sign off on the paperwork. And he's like coughing so hard, he's like kind of like waving, like yeah, he's fine. It's just like everybody has just got a butt in their mouth. It's hilarious.
Yeah, I think All That Jazz was the first time I witnessed somebody smoking to the point where they reached the end of one cigarette and they lit the next cigarette off of that one.
Smoking in the shower.
Right. You're going nonstop. You're going butt to butt on that. And I'm like, wow, people fucking smoke, man.
And apparently he really did smoke that much.
Yeah.
It's like I read a book about. I'm sorry. Did you say 5-pack a day habit?
Oh, Jesus Christ! It's a miracle he lived as long as he did.
Right?
He was like actively working in a coal mine while dancing. That's what he was doing with his own body. Oh my God.
Yeah, the doctors are smoking. The priests are smoking. Everybody's smoking in this.
To go back a little bit when you said, well, how did this even happen? I think one of the compelling factors in how this happened in getting The Exorcist to the screen in 1973 goes back to 1968 when you have the back-to-back successes of Night of the Living Dead, which is an independent feature, and then Rosemary's Baby, which is a Paramount picture. And that ends up, getting Oscar nominations and is a smash hit. And it was a huge book. And at this time, you have that growing group of horror novels starting to take over in like, it's an airport novel. It's a paperback. They just like live. Like there's a triumvirate that every book of the time seems to quote, if you loved Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist, and The Other, like those three things were such huge hits in the publishing world that they were more willing to take a chance on something like, if that many people have read the book of The Exorcist, how many more people will show up to a movie, which is a lot easier to digest? So I think from that standpoint, they thought, okay, and you've got a director who has a lot of cachet. Now, speaking of the book, I read it years ago. Have you read The Exorcist, lately?
Well, I actually I watched this a couple of weeks ago, actually. I brought it up to you afterwards because I just got, a notion to watch it. Sometimes I just do. Sometimes you just have those horror movies in your cachet where you're just like, I think I'll watch that tonight just for the hell of it. Yeah. And so I had read the book before and then I purchased it again recently. So I've kind of been like skimming through it, but it as we mentioned earlier, it does pretty much follow the book very closely. Mm-hmm. Certain scenes are a little dragged out, let's say. Sure. Like the scene we were mentioning earlier is a little worse in the book, as it turns out.
William Peter Blatty, a former comedy writer, this novel success and the film success killed his comedy career.
I can totally understand that.
He has a belief, and so does Billy Friedkin and even Linda Blair when they've done interviews on the subject. William Peter Blatty passed a couple years back, but in interviews, they are often saying, this isn't a horror movie.
Well, they can think that if they want to.
Yeah, like, nothing's going to take that away from them.
I feel like that is sort of in the same vein as people using, and we've spoken about this, ranted, whatever you want to call it, at length before. The use of the phrase elevated horror.
Sure, yeah. Which means like serious people are involved.
Right. It's what people do when they don't want their the movie they're working on to be minimized in some way. Now, I get that because horror in the 70s was not, it was still incredibly popular and a moneymaker for Hollywood, but it was still, both in film and in print, was still considered a lesser art form.
It's a B movie. It's a programmer. It's something you put in a double feature for kids in the afternoon.
Right.
While there was the occasional serious horror movie, and really from their standpoint of what a horror movie was pre The Exorcist, they're right. It's not a horror movie in the sense that every other, quote unquote horror film up until that point had been things like Edgar Allan Poe adaptations or giant monsters or, creatures from beyond space. Those were horror pictures. The Mummy shambles in and, you can walk faster than the Mummy. I understand that The Exorcist is different from a quote unquote horror movie, but it is, again, one of those films that sort of fits in that 1968 to 1980 window in which the definition of a horror movie is totally in flux.
But it also became its own genre of horror movies.
Exactly. Yeah.
Every demonic possession movie from that point up till now owes an incredibly large debt to The Exorcist.
We talked about this a little bit with Return of the Living Dead, how much every zombie movie, tilts towards the Return of the Living Dead's definition of what a zombie is. When you redefine the definition, and you see that a lot of people come to that original film or that breakaway point after seeing the more derivative reference points to it. And so it might not have the same impact because in pop culture, we've seen this in everything from, car insurance commercials to comedies to television series. It's been done. Some people do it very well. Some people not so much. But it all comes back to this one point. There are no deviations from that don't owe a massive debt to the origin point. And so I wonder if, newer people to The Exorcist are kind of like, well, I don't, I've seen this, but people in 1973 hadn't fucking seen it.
Right, exactly. I think that I probably would have watched this one of the first times it was on television. Mm-hmm. Which means I didn't even get the full effect at the time.
Sure.
And it was still, because I was probably like, I don't know, 9 or 10 maybe. And again, as I've established multiple times, not really supervised as to what I watched on television. So I watched this, was freaked the fuck out. Mm-hmm. And then I watched it again some years later and I'm like, oh, wow, boy, did I miss a lot. And then I saw it again when they did the version you haven't seen, where they decided, let's take this one step further. Let's add some subliminal imagery because we're not fucking with this audience enough.
The subliminal imagery, I think, after I first saw it, the thing that fucked with me the most. The dream that Karis has.
Oh, that's to me that dream. That's the scariest part of the whole movie to me. That's because it looks so like a lot of dream sequences in movies don't really look like, to me at least, what a dream seems like and feels like. This just has it down perfectly.
Because the rhythms don't work. It's not operating on reality. It's not even montage. It's something that is just out of your control. And, there are those people who can manipulate their dreams. I'm not one of them. But this pretty much feels like a nightmare you can't control. And the subliminal image of Captain Howdy in the middle of that is something that, has wormed its way into my brain. Like,
have you ever seen
when
that?
I close my eyes, that's what I see.
Have you ever seen the one of the unused trailers that they created that was just that kind of like a strobe light? I'm like, you got to kill people with this thing.
Honestly, yes. I think part of my brain had put that in a file that I couldn't access in the hopes that I wouldn't think about it. But now it's right up there at the top. Gina, thank you.
I'm sorry.
So much.
Well, I'm thinking about it too. So yeah, we're in this together.
Where can people find you on these here internets? I'm going to go into a corner and curl up in a ball.
Sit quietly for a little while.
Just going to try to drink away the pain in the hopes that I just numb everything north of my neck. I'll never think about that.
I'll be wondering if God will forgive me for my sins. And then you can find me on Twitter under Porson72. Well, that's the thing. I mean, this is why I am going to say I don't really know much about Mormonism's view of the devil. I don't know if y'all have a devil or some form of the devil, but I was raised in the Catholic faith, and we are intimately acquainted with the devil.
The devil's got a capital D over there.
Yes.
In parts.
Yes. Yeah. So this hits different, as the kids say. If you much like Saint Maud, which we reviewed earlier we talked about earlier this year, it won't hit you as hard if you have not been marinated in some kind of religion at some point in your life.
But I do believe it is of the same. I don't know, because I would also kind of put Us in that category of a film that I think about a lot. In the months after we watched Saint Maud, which is available if you're on our Patreon feed, and that episode is as well worth it as is the majority that we put on there. That movie haunts me. Like, I think about it a lot. It just has wormed its way into my brain case, and it's not the most pleasant thing in the world, but there are so many movies that don't make you think, and there's nothing wrong with it, but ones that that refuse to let go, that claw into the crevices of your brain, and just you have a hard time separating yourself from them because they affect you that much. That is hard to do, and The Exorcist absolutely accomplishes that, despite some goofier than you might remember moments, like the Virgin Mary, who apparently has been modified to look like something Tim Burton put together in his garage.
I actually thought it was like something you see in a John Waters movie.
It's not. I mean, it looks like teenagers have done it. Is this?
Well, again, that actually is in the book, because there's a whole Blatty did his homework on satanic worship and people calling up the devil and sort of rituals that were cast, and part of this was defiling statues of saints and the Blessed Mother. So it's just odd though, because it's just this weird throwaway shot that's like nothing really ever comes about it, but it kind of goes more into it in the book. I
think putting the Batman's the Joker head on a saint statue, that's
far more unsettling. That's more unsettling. It still looks silly, but it's but also this is kind of creepy.
Yeah, very much so. Well, I often play the movie while we're talking about it, just in case I see something I want to discuss. And just one of those fucking flashes came up while they're drawing blood. And it's like, Jesus fucking Christ. It's relentless. Oh, it hurts my brain.
Well, it's a movie that, you know, a lot of horror movies you come away with one image that you will retain in your you know, memory palace. That's pretty good, but there's a lot in this. You know, you've got Father Merrin sort of facing the dog statue, which is actually supposed to be Pazuzu, where you've got that, you know, while you got that really just sort of discordant sound playing on the soundtrack that sort of sounds like, you know, voices humming, but also might be, you know, locusts, but there's also, you know, animals growling at each other, and
it's the earth tearing itself apart.
Yeah, it just keeps getting louder and louder and louder, and then it cuts out, and then
it's so relentless. Yeah, and when it disappears, you're like, oh, thank God. And then the horror movie starts.
Right. And then you've got Reagan levitating. You've got Reagan sort of like in this almost like worshipful pose on her knees. And you know, and again, you've got the backlight behind her. And then you've got Father Carrot sort of rising up with like the, you know, demonic possession eyes with his, you know, again, that's so cliche at this point. You know, that when you get possessed by the devil, you get funky eyes and
right.
But I don't think that had been done until this. I mean, in Rosemary's Baby, there was a brief glimpse of, you know, it was supposed to be presumably, you know, a close up of the devil's eyes. He sort of had the yellow eyes, but he also didn't look human.
Yeah.
Whereas here, you know, he looks normal except for the weird eyes. And it's just so, because he just looks tormented and frightened and, you know, full of rage, and it's such a, you know, huge burn into the brain moment.
The movie vacillates so much between the documentary style where the camera just happens to be around. It doesn't feel super staged. There's not a lot of showy moments. And then there'll be times where it's definitely manipulating you. There's a sequence in which Detective Ketterman, or Lieutenant, I don't know which way he goes, but he's the guy who will eventually be played by George C. Scott in the third film. And he's talking with Chris because in his mind, he has a gut feeling that Burke was tossed from the window before he rolled down all those stairs, that he might have been killed before he fell down the stairs. And the camera pushed slowly as they're talking at the kitchen table, pushes in from both sides. So that even when in coverage, it flips over to the other person's shoulder, the camera is still pushing in. The pressure is still on. It's still building. There's no way out. There's no escape. She's trapped. Her daughter is obviously not in a place where she ever wants the police involved in this death, because the person upstairs who used to be my daughter now claims to be Satan. So this is not a good thing. Like, she's already under pressure. Just try to give her daughter relief. And you can, like, there's so much added to it that is an artificial thing they're doing with that camera. That is very purposeful. And yet there are other moments that just feel like he ran outside with a camera and said, all right, like, you just walk towards me and maybe the train will come by. It's both ends of it. You feel the verisimilitude, the reality of the situation, and then this unreality is built on top of it in such a way that you begin to believe it.
Right, exactly.
Whereas, you know, in Rosemary's Baby, when they look in the crib, they have this Morticia Adams key light on those wolf eyes. Every time I see it, I burst out laughing.
Right, and I think that is a false step in an otherwise pretty flawless movie. You don't need to show it. Just show her horrified reaction and leave it at that.
Yes, because like all I'd ever seen previous to that was like stuff from cutscenes that they would put on television or something when she goes, "It's eyes. What have you done to his eyes?" And that is way scarier than seeing a doll with weird painted eyes on it. with the Morticia Addams key light on his arm.
Exactly.
You're about to give a double entendre about sex and torture. Because we are a horror movie character podcast, I thought there's no plot to discuss here. Everyone knows the plot of the
even if you haven't seen it, you know what it's about.
Yes. But I thought we might give some examination to how these individual characters are built. So why don't we start with the first person we really meet hardcore, and that is Father Marin in the Dateline Iraq sequence.
Played by 46-year-old at the time, Max von Sydow. Made you look 70. If you see him without
the makeup at the time, you're like, who the fuck is that hot dude? And they just made him old.
And I'm pretty sure this was most Americans' first introduction to him.
Sure, yeah.
As an actor.
I doubt very much they had been digging into the Seventh Seal. I'm sure some of the coastal elites had probably seen it.
You like watch this and then watch Flash Gordon.
Yes, that's the same guy.
Acting.
Here, he imbues Marin with sort of every single frame is like, oh my God, that guy's gonna die.
He is exhausted. He's just hanging on by a thread. And it's like, who signed off on this guy flying to Iraq? I mean, honestly, 1973, that had to take about 37 hours to get there.
Right, sure.
You were taking like multiple connection flights. Who was putting this ailing senior citizen through that?
And he's got his nitroglycerin pill, so things are dire.
Oh yeah, I have to take I take a medication which the pills are very, very teeny tiny, and every time I take them, I always think of him taking a little pill box.
Just shaking. Will he get it in his mouth? He also gets scared. There's a scare here, which he's almost run over by a horse-drawn coach containing one weeping woman.
Well, that's another one of those, like, what the fuck's going on here? Right. Like, it's just like, everything is bad. There are just so many, bellwethers of bad things happening.
Yeah.
And you've got who is this woman? Is she going to a funeral? Why is she crying? What's going on?
How do you not hear a horse-drawn carriage coming out at you?
It almost literally comes out of nowhere.
And he's almost gunned down by the guards at the dig site. They come out like guns drawn, like, oh, sorry, I almost killed you, but I guess I'll let 3 minutes go by and death will just take you anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you're not long for this world, Padre.
It certainly does not look it. And then he has a staring contest with this statue of what we now know as Pazuzu. I'm not sure that Pazuzu has ever spoken.
Not in this one. It's spoken a lot in Exorcist 2.
But when I didn't notice until now, and I can't tell you why, is that the statue has a giant snake for a penis.
Well, yeah. That feels very demonic to me.
Yeah.
That's you. I mean, nobody told you to get the high def Blu-rays, Patrick. That's on you.
That is. I should not have.
I just watched
television this large.
I just rented mine on like Amazon. I did not notice any snake penis.
It's crawling up one leg, so it's not necessarily attached, but it's definitely supposed to represent his penis. Pazuzu is compensating. So let's talk a little bit more about our favorite 70s single mom, Chris McNeil. And like a pack of Virginia Slims, she's come a long way, baby. I'm glad that she's never gone away. You know what I mean?
Who, Ellen Burstyn?
Yes.
Yeah, no, yeah.
So many people from the 70s were kind of like stuck in that era, in their prime. And it took a while for people to appreciate them. I always feel like Ellen Burstyn is an actress that tons of people are like, oh no, you know what we need? Ellen Burstyn. And I just don't know that there's a ton of Ellen Burstyns walking around right now. She's as unique as any of those great 70s movie stars. You can't say like the reason that she's on there is like pure sex appeal. Nor can you say she's just a nobody from Hicksville. She's just a very unique, real presence in every movie.
Right. I was going to say she feels very, even though she's a presumably pretty famous movie actor. I mean, she is on a cover of like a gossip magazine in one scene with her daughter for some reason, which is weird. Yeah. But
soup's weird.
And presumably well off because she has a staff in her house, which none of them really seem to do much. They kind of just stand around much of the
time. She's the one wandering into attics to see if rats are there. She's often making breakfast on her own past the
I'm not entirely sure what Sharon's role in the household is. I assume that she was at one point perhaps Reagan's nanny, but Reagan is maybe a little too old for a nanny at this point. She is chronologically too old for a nanny. She's a little childlike, she's like 12, but I mean, she's probably maybe a little immature for 12, but also in that way that a lot of children of divorce are. Like she's clingy with her mom and needing her attention, and it's normal. It's not anything. I don't think that the movie's trying to say anything about her specifically, but
and yet I do feel that there is this vein that doesn't get talked about as much when it comes to The Exorcist, that is a little culturally misogynistic. Like, what's the reason the devil picks Reagan McNeil? And, Marin's definition is, and it comes from the book, and it wasn't in the theatrical, and then they added it, was that she's not really the target. She's just such an innocent that her suffering makes everyone else doubt God's love.
Right. Like, it's to send everybody in despair.
But there is a vein a little bit like the reason Karras's mom dies is because he's not involved, and he would have to be involved as a man. And the reason that, Reagan might be vulnerable is that Chris is all alone and she should have a man in her life. And it's kind of like, ew, fucking gross.
I mean,
I don't think it's intentional.
I was going to say, is that your interpretation, or do you think that's what they meant? Because I thought of, or I do see what you're talking about, but also I think that Reagan is vulnerable because she's lonely.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, she's literally playing with the Ouija board by herself, which that's not how that works.
Right.
And it's like, can Sharon take this kid somewhere? I mean, why is this poor kid, hanging around killing time for herself by herself, wait until, and I'm not saying this as a criticism against Chris. I mean, she is, working to, keep this nice house for them, but she's basically just killing time until Chris can make time to wherever they said they were going to go to the zoo or go to the movies or something. And and Reagan's like, oh my God, that's so wonderful, Mom. Thank you for taking me to the movies.
They mentioned that she's waiting to move to LA because she wants Reagan to finish the school year. I'm like, we never see her go to school.
Right. And it's definitely fall, because there's a scene where she walks past trick-or-treaters.
Yeah, but we never see her get ready for school. Again, the movie doesn't have to show me everything. It's packed with
she's never seen anywhere but the house and at various doctor's appointments. So she's lonely and isolated.
Yeah, is she being homeschooled? Like, I don't. It's again, it's supposed to, unmoor you. Yeah, I don't think the sort of cultural misogyny angle is anything more than it's a product of its time. I don't think it's intentional at all.
No, and everybody's pretty respectful to her. Like Kinderman is very respectful towards her, which is, interesting, because he seemed like he could become very intimidating on it, on a dime. But he's very polite to her. He doesn't pry about what Reagan's medical condition is. He just, I think that he knows there's something more going on there. And of course he does, because he shows up at the end. Yeah. But he is really reluctant to push her, which I think is good, because I think, in the hands of a different director, he maybe, end up coming off as, a sort of secondary antagonist. And, and when our Dark Lord is your primary antagonist, you don't need secondary antagonists.
You don't need this mustachioed chomper to come off as working for the devil unbeknownst to him. It's unnecessary. It's more world building than anything else. Let's talk about Reagan, since we've kind of drifted into her. What we know about Reagan from the intro is she wants a horse real bad. And that's it. That's her character. She's a sad, lonely girl.
Yeah, we don't get a lot of time with her as herself.
Yeah.
Maybe like 10 minutes. But we also have to assume that by the time we meet her, it's already happening. Because
one does assume that.
Because she's
affected.
Because maybe like the second or third time we see her, she's saying, "Oh, look, my friend, Captain Howdy."
Yeah. And the bed is shaking so violently at night she can't sleep there. So like whether or not it's made its way inside or it's just like poking at her defenses, whatever they might be, you have to believe that from the word go, she's at least under the influence of the devil.
Yeah.
And then we're remiss to say that, Reagan McNeil is essentially a built performance. It's absolutely centered in Linda Blair, but then you have the stunt performer who's doing a lot of the work that a minor just simply cannot and should not be doing. And then you have Mercedes McCambridge, a woman who said, in order to do this, I have been sober for many years now. I'm going to have to start smoking and drinking again in order to make this
and eat raw eggs.
And have a priest around so that we can consult after every single take.
I mean, I have to imagine that some of the stuff she's saying is just like exhausting. Like
yeah, constantly telling people to have sex with one another or to lick her. It's just all of it is just meant to poke, prod, make people uncomfortable. And, it's the amalgamation of the makeup, the central performance, the stunt performance, the voice performance. You're creating something no one person, I think, can accomplish. That's not to take away from any of those pieces. They're all collaborating to make this one amazing character that honestly you couldn't replicate if you tried. And guess what, everybody? They're about to try.
One thing before we move on to the next character is I recently watched, I think that might have been what inspired me to watch the movie again, a documentary that's currently on Shudder, in which it's mostly talking to William Friedkin about his thoughts on faith and what he put into making The Exorcist. And there are some behind the scenes clips, and it shows Linda Blair filming these scenes and just doing the stuff that she says in character as possessed Reagan in her own voice.
Yeah.
And then it was later, Mercedes McCambridge's voice was later dubbed into it. And it's just sort of amusing in a horrifying way. It's like, I don't know if you
maybe taking the veil back too much.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard your kid accidentally or on purposely curse and you weren't supposed to hear it. It's funny, but also like, ugh, geez, no. I'm not ready to hear you sound like a little adult.
Yeah. And, by all accounts, and she's the first one to say it, like they tried everything they could to retain her innocence throughout this. Like they were really trying not to make this a terrible choice in her life.
Yeah, I mean, for all of Friedkin's faults as a director, he seemed to be pretty good with her, from what I understand. Yes. And I'm fairly certain that Linda Blair, only looks back on it as a positive experience. And I feel like that, this far removed at this point, as it turned out, she did not actually have a good time with it. She would have said so by now.
Yeah, I think just the one sort of lingering back issue seems to be a lot of it. And I don't think she had a particular, it seems to me that her desires are more closely aligned with the early Reagan McNeil. She just wanted to have a horse. She has an animal rescue and her life is infinitely more dedicated to that. Every once in a while she's called into duty, and I think she takes it so that she can pour that money back into her true passions. So when it comes to child actors, I don't think she fell as hard as some. But we would be remiss if we did not talk about the drama surrounding Father Karras, Damien Karras. Originally, Warner Brothers approached Jack Nicholson, who turned this down.
Wow. I can't even imagine.
I think that, but I have to believe that when anyone saw a script in 1973, they probably said, I wonder what Jack Nicholson is doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
They didn't put thought into it. They're like, get me a movie star. Because after Nicholson, you have Paul Newman being reached out to. And he's like, no, I'm not a young, hot priest. I'm Paul fucking Newman. So then after going through a bunch of auditions, they sign Stacy Keach, who's an interesting choice. I don't think it would have been the worst one. If you want a sort of a view of what Stacy Keach might have been like in this role, William Peter Blatty ended up directing a movie called The Ninth Configuration. As far as I know, it is still on Shudder. If you haven't seen it, it is well worth a look. It is a very different film than The Exorcist, but I think you would see what Stacy might have put into this role. I don't think the film would have suffered overall, but it's hard to get better than Jason Miller in this particular role.
Yeah, he was more known as a writer than an actor.
Yeah, he pretty much got cast off of, he had written a play called That Championship Season, and Friedkin sees that and basically goes backstage, hands him the paperback of The Exorcist and said, you should read this. And then there's all this rigmarole of getting Stacy Keach out and Jason Miller in. And eventually it happens, but not without, paying Stacy Keach off entirely. And I think William Peter Blatty was more in the Stacy Keach camp. But you cannot deny the performance that is given here by Jason Miller.
Oh no, he is, kind of the anchor of the movie here. He's, I would say he's a co-protagonist with Chris.
Yes, absolutely.
And I just feel that the relationship with the mother, who is clearly not American born, gives a different element to it. And I don't know that would have worked with Stacy Keach, because Stacy Keach looks like he was born from people who settled Texas. He does not. I wouldn't have bought him as the son of a little shriveled up Greek woman.
Exactly. Yes.
I mean, now to be fair, they might not have cast the same actress, but still, I feel like that element, just her sad little apartment with her, her sad little radio, and it's just like everything just kind of pulls together with him cast as Karras.
I'm gonna pull a last minute substitution. Normally we would do choose your own death venture. Choose your own dire apartment. Of all the dire apartments we've viewed, and I think there are two main contenders here. Which would you choose to live in if you were forced to, and why? Mrs. Karras's apartment in some sort of outer borough, by the looks of it, or Alice's apartment in Friday the 13th Part 2.
Oh gosh, I mean, my first thought would be Mrs. Karras, because I got to be honest with you, this feels very much like 70s and 80s grandma apartment to me. It's just where she's kind of living on her pension and probably spent 50 years smoking, so everything's like this. Right. Everything's discolored and grimy, and maybe she doesn't get out as much as she should, and it's just bleak, and she's just sitting there just waiting for it to happen. And we know what it means. But I mean, I guess as far as just not being quite as depressing, I would have to say Alice's apartment. I mean, at least she has room to paint.
True. She has room for her art.
Yeah, all Mrs. Karras does is sit there and listen to some sort of Greek radio program.
And you have to believe that rocking chair is basically molded to her butt at this point.
Oh yeah,
like she's sleeping in it. Oh my God. The only thing that Mrs. Karras's apartment obviously has is that she's closer to a train. She can get in and out of the city if she wants, if her leg will allow her to get down the stairs. Whereas we don't know where Alice lives. It could be anywhere. It's in another world.
I just assume it's like
just
somewhere
ruled by ponds.
I was gonna say I just assume somewhere in like the central Jersey suburbs.
You know, you're closer to a decent hoagie where Alice is. That's true. Ah, man, but then you have to have cinder block furniture. It's real tough.
But also she's like college age. So I mean that's not too bad for a college age individual. Yeah. But this is like, this is the end of Mrs. Karras's life. This is all she has.
Sure. Very, very, very true. She's kind of got a shitty brother. I think that guy's real shitty.
Yeah, I mean, he's putting it all on Damien, even though he's the one that lives closer to her. So
yes, like, why are you a priest? Like, if you were a real psychologist, like, you could have your mother living anywhere. It's like, that's not helping, asshole. That's not helping at all. Just another quick reference here for those who remember the prophecy and it beginning in the quote unquote ghetto. And then watch that, and then watch the sequence with Karras. Now you'll see what's a set and what's real, because here it looks like straight out, like you think the wolves from Wolfen are about to crawl around the corner at any possible second. It is very real.
Oh yeah. I mean that is pretty indicative of New York in the 70s.
Captain Howdy, very rude about working actresses' looks, or just a realist?
I think he's just rude in general.
Burt Dennings, he probably won't end up being your new dad, no matter how much you just want a male presence around. He's very into outing the help as Nazis. He's a rude drunk, and he ends up getting tossed from a 3rd-story window and down several flights of stone steps. And I'm not mad about it.
No, I think that probably better him than Sharon, as useless as Sharon is.
You have the butler, Carl, and he doesn't believe it's rats. That's Carl.
You got Mrs. Carl?
Mrs. Carl, who knows how to fry an egg. We don't really learn much about her other than the fact she did not put that crucifix under Reagan's pillow. That's about what we get from her. And the Spinal Tap in this thing really freaks me out. And like I've always said, Spinal Tap first, puppet show second.
Maybe
again,
you want the puppet.
That is a great joke if you have a Google window open. Maybe
you want the puppet show first in this case. But yeah, like I said before, they amp up the medical stuff a lot in the newly edited version.
Absolutely true. And of course, there's the fact that the guy who's the helper there, it ended up being a convicted murderer.
Which William Friedkin turned around and used in Cruising, a movie we will probably never talk about.
I don't know that it's our movie to talk about. Let's put it that way. I definitely suggest people go out and watch it. There's a great Blu-ray of it right now. It looks great. It is fucking wild. It is worth seeking out. I'm not sure it ever should have been made, but it was made, and that means you should probably.
And you could hear Al Pacino describe himself as fun-sized, which I love.
I mean, he's small hip. I get it. When he pumps iron in that movie, I'm telling you, people should watch that.
It is an interesting movie. I don't want to say good or bad because it's not really my call to make. Right. Yes. It's interesting though.
And daring for its time, but of course daring from the standpoint of almost everyone involved in it was a straight male. So I did enjoy this time watching it and seeing how cool and calm Marin is during an exorcism. It's like,
because he's done it. He's done this before.
Yeah. He looks like Dom Toretto in the middle of a car race. I've seen all this before. For him, holy water is just his nos when you think about it.
So do we think that when we don't actually see Marin die, we just Karras discovers his body and he presumably had a heart attack. His heart has finally given out. Yeah. But Do we think that's just exhaustion, or do we think that it was that the devil kind of, stopped his heart?
I mean, he's clinging on to life from the first frame. I don't, he obviously has the experience to do this, but his body is failing him, and he is pouring his last moments of life into trying to make this exorcism happen. So I don't know that it takes direct supernatural malfeasance for him to keel over. Like he almost keels over the scene before.
Like a draft could take him out.
Yeah, like it's hard for him to stand up from sitting down on the stairs. Like if he had keeled over there, I also wouldn't have blamed him. Like he's given everything he's totally got.
So you think it was just a natural occurrence then?
I think the devil wore him down is my charitable reading of it.
I mean, I think you could kind of, describe, the past year and a half as just the devil is wearing us down.
Yeah, very much
we're all just frantically, shakily taking our tiny pills.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm taking ivermectin from the gel form.
You got that?
Squirting it into my mouth.
You're not just putting it on crackers as a tasty snack.
Direct in the tongue, swishing it around with a little water or Mountain Dew, my preferred beverage of choice.
Getting that horse paste.
That's right. If it's good enough for sheep, it should be good enough for you, sheeple. That's what I always said. No, fucking please. God damn it. Wear a mask. I don't want to do it anymore either. I'm wearing a mask.
Get your goddamn shots already. What the fuck?
I have to believe everyone in this audience, unless directly ordered by their doctor not to do so for distinct health reasons, like their immune system is simply shot, that they have taken the very preventable measures to avoid COVID-19. But if you have not, and you have waited until now for me, a complete doofus, to tell you this, please do so before you get COVID and your insurance company says, we're not going to pay for that because you could have taken a free shot and you chose not to, beyond your health and safety and those around you.
Just do it.
I needed a drink after that. For fuck's sake, please, people. I don't want to rent out movie theaters simply so my kid can see Shang-Chi for every Marvel movie. Okay, let's move past this. Anything else that we've missed along the way? I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but
yeah,
also,
I mean, it could do a scene by scene breakdown of it, and just and how it is influenced so many movies that came after it, and how it's the stuff of nightmares and. It, again, like you could even you don't even have to, you can watch this movie with your eyes closed, and just the noises and the voices and the sound design and the music are just going to still be a full horrifying sensory experience.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's an incredible motion picture. Any chance you have to see it with a group, I would totally suggest it. If you have to see it at home, keep your phone in the other room, really allow it to work its magic. That's the way it's going to work the best. And, if the devil's just something you've never ever believed in, I think there's enough creep factor in this motion picture that I have to believe it will work on most people. I just have to believe that.
And if it doesn't, don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Keep it to yourself.
Exactly.
The kill by kill motto.
Yeah. If you don't like it, don't tell me. Don't bust my balls about this. Okay. Just don't.
So where can people bust your balls on these here internets?
I mean, there's always Twitter. The number one spot to bust people's balls all the time as much as possible.
Yeah. Porcelain 72.
Porcelain 72.
Kill Pod. And we have the t-shirt store is still in operation. We're still working on murderstab.biz. Hopefully that'll be up there sooner rather than later. We got fun stuff coming up next week, everybody, when you're done rating and reviewing us on iTunes. You know what you're going to want to do? You're going to want to check out Candyman, because guess what? We're going to talk Candyman. come hell or high water, we've both purchased tickets, and our every intention is to go see Candyman and talk about it. And that's what we'll be talking about next week. So if you were looking for Dish by Dish, that will be postponed by 1 week because of timeliness. So our apologies to our Dish by Dish listeners, but Candyman is something we've been waiting to watch for 2 years now, and we fucking want to see it already. So we're going to do it. And if you have not rated and reviewed us on iTunes, please do so, or any of your podcatchers that allow reviews. It helps us be seen and heard by more people. That just about does it. Until next time, for myself and for Gina, the body count will continue. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.